cold alpha king refused all mates, until a poor rejected omega awakened his wolf. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Emily Carter was an omega, but not the kind that anyone would ever want. She was weak, fragile, and for some reason, her wolf never fully awakened. For years, she had lived with the scorn of her pack, a constant reminder of how different she was. The other omega girls had their wolves, their strength, their abilities. Emily had nothing. The elders whispered that she was broken, a mistake of nature. Her scent, which should have been alluring, was bland, almost non-existent. It left her invisible in the world of shifters. No one wanted her. Not the strong, handsome alphas. Not even the other omegas who could have helped her find a place in the pack. They all turned their backs on her. Emily spent her days in silence, taking solace in the small things, working in the gardens, helping the elderly, avoiding the cruel eyes of those who saw her as a failure. But no matter what she did, the feeling of being an outcast never left her. She was nothing. Then, one day, as she walked through the dense forest near the pack's territory, she stumbled upon an injured creature. It was a wolf, a large one, its fur stained with blood and its body limp, clearly in pain. As she knelt down beside it, Emily felt something stir inside her, something she couldn't explain. She had no reason to care for this wolf, but there was something in its eyes that spoke to her, a silent plea for help. Her hands shook as she reached out, her heart racing in a way it never had before. She gently touched the wolf's wound, trying to assess the damage. She didn't have the skills to heal, but for some reason, she felt compelled to try. To her surprise, the wound began to close, the bloodstains fading, the first softening under her touch. She couldn't explain what was happening, but she felt a deep connection to this creature. She wasn't just saving it. She was awakening something inside herself. As the wolf's eyes fluttered open, a strange energy filled the air, and for the first time in her life, Emily felt seen. Little did she know, the wolf she had saved was no ordinary wolf. It was Zachary Thornridge, the Alpha King, disguised and injured. He had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. But in that instant, as Emily's healing touch brought him back to life, something shifted between them. Zachary's heart, which had been locked away for so long, began to beat again, not with the cold indifference of a king, but with something warmer, something more alive. The moment he looked into her eyes, he knew she was the one, the mate he had been waiting for, the one who could awaken his own heart, the one who could claim his soul. But how could he, the mighty Alpha King, allow himself to feel this? How could he, after rejecting every mate that had come before, finally accept her, the weak and rejected omega? He was cold, ruthless, and feared by all. Yet, as Emily reached out to him, unsure of what was happening but certain that she had to protect this wolf, Zachary realized the truth. She wasn't just the healer of his wounds, she was the healer of his broken heart. And in that moment, everything changed. Zachary Thornridge, the cold Alpha King, was no longer cold. And Emily, the poor, rejected omega, was no longer invisible. I can still feel it. The warmth of his touch lingered on my skin, as if something inside me had been awakened. Emily sat alone in the small cottage she had called home for the past few years, her mind spinning in a whirlwind of emotions. The wolf? No, it wasn't just a wolf. It was Zachary Thornridge, the Alpha King, the cold, untouchable ruler who had rejected every mate and now, for some inexplicable reason, was here, in front of her. She couldn't comprehend it fully, the way her heart raced whenever she thought about him. Was this real? Was he really the Alpha King? And if so, what did it mean for her, the omega who had never been chosen, never been good enough? She shook her head, trying to clear the thoughts clouding her mind. She couldn't let herself believe in this fantasy, not when she knew how the world worked. Omegas were nothing. But the feeling inside her, something deeper than just curiosity, something that pulled her towards him, was undeniable. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out into the dark forest, her eyes catching the faint glow of the moon. It was beautiful, peaceful, but tonight, it felt like the calm before the storm. She heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching the cottage, and her heart skipped a beat. There he was again, the man who had been a stranger only hours ago, yet somehow, now, she felt connected to him. He had changed before her eyes, from a broken wolf to the powerful Alpha King. Emily's breath hitched when she saw him through the window. He stood just outside, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlight, his silver-gray eyes glowing with an intensity she had never seen before. He was watching her. Her pulse quickened as she opened the door slowly, stepping outside. "Zachary," she said softly, almost to herself. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice low and steady, as though he had been waiting for her to say his name. "But you need to understand something." She swallowed, her throat dry. "Understand what?" "That this connection between us, it's not just some chance encounter. It's fate." His words sent a shiver down her spine. Fate. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him that this was all impossible, that she was just an omega, a weak, unwanted soul. But the truth was, deep down, she had always known there was something more waiting for her. Something that could change everything. "You don't have to be afraid," Zachary continued, his tone gentle but firm. "I was cold for so long because I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to care. But when I saw you, when I felt your touch, I knew. You're the one." Emily took a step back, her mind racing. "The one?" she whispered. "But why me? I'm nothing. I'm not even a real omega. I can't even shift properly." Zachary reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing over her cheek. "You are everything I never knew I needed," he said, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "And I don't care what you think of yourself. You're more than just an omega. You're mine." Emily's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the impossible. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a dream. "But you rejected everyone," she said, her voice trembling. "You turned them all away. Why would you choose me?" He smiled, the expression softening his otherwise stern features. "Because you're the only one who ever saw me. Not as the king, not as the monster everyone fears, but as the man I am underneath. And I can't run from that any longer." Emily felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest, her doubts slowly fading. She had spent so long believing she wasn't worthy of love, of being seen, that the idea of someone, especially someone like Zachary, wanting her felt foreign. But in that moment, with his touch grounding her and his words wrapping around her like a safety net, she realized something. Maybe she wasn't just a rejected omega after all. Maybe, just maybe, she was the one who could awaken his heart. The one who could make him believe in love, in a future beyond the crown, beyond the duties and the coldness. "What now?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zachary's smile widened as he pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead in a gentle, lingering kiss. "Now, we take it one step at a time. Together." And for the first time in her life, Emily felt something she hadn't known was possible: hope. The days that followed were a blur of emotions and uncertainties for Emily. She had never imagined that her life could change so drastically in such a short time. The connection between her and Zachary grew stronger with each passing day, yet the doubts in her mind never quite disappeared. She had been raised to believe that someone like her, someone who had never truly fit in, never truly belonged, could never be a part of the grand world of alphas and their kingdoms. And yet, here she was, standing at the side of the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. As they walked through the forest together, the towering trees casting long shadows in the fading sunlight, Emily could not help but glance at Zachary, still amazed by the strength he exuded. Even though he had shown her tenderness, she knew there was more to him than what met the eye. He was the Alpha King, a ruler bound by his duty, and she was just an omega, someone who had always been overlooked. "You don't have to keep your distance," Zachary said, his voice low but firm, as he stopped walking and turned to face her. "I'm not going to bite you." Emily looked up at him, her heart racing slightly at his words. It was hard to shake the feeling that she didn't deserve his attention, his kindness, that she was somehow out of place. "I know," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "But sometimes, I feel like I'm still not good enough for you." Zachary's expression softened as he stepped closer, reaching out to gently lift her chin so their eyes met. You're more than good enough. You're everything I never knew I needed. Emily could feel the sincerity in his words, but part of her still struggled to accept it. She had spent so many years believing she was unworthy of anything good. She had seen the way the other Omegas were treated, celebrated, chosen, respected. And then there was her, Emily Carter, invisible and unwanted. I never thought I would find someone like you, Zachary continued, his voice a gentle rumble. I thought I was destined to rule alone, to carry the weight of the kingdom on my own. But you. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. You changed everything. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had no idea how to process all of this, how to understand the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. How could she be the one to change him, to make him feel things he had locked away for so long? She had always seen herself as broken, as someone who would never fit into the world of the powerful. And yet, here she was, standing at the threshold of something entirely new, something she could never have imagined. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now. Zachary's gaze softened as he stepped back slightly, giving her space. Now we take it one step at a time. We don't have to rush. You don't have to be anything other than who you are. You're already enough. Emily swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never heard such words in her life. No one had ever told her that before. That she was enough. That she didn't need to prove herself. Slowly, she reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it in his. The moment their hands touched, she felt a surge of warmth, a quiet energy that seemed to pass between them, binding them in a way she couldn't explain. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know how to be with you. I don't know how to be a part of your world. Zachary's fingers tightened around hers, his grip reassuring. You don't have to know everything right now. Just trust me. Trust us. Emily closed her eyes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She could feel her heart settling, the fear beginning to fade as she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something different, something real. When she opened her eyes again, she looked up at him, meeting his gaze with newfound strength. I trust you, she said softly, the words carrying more weight than she had expected. Zachary smiled, a rare and genuine expression that warmed her to her core. Then let's take that first step together. And for the first time in her life, Emily felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she thought. Maybe there was a place for her, right here, at his side. The days after their confession were filled with an unspoken understanding between Emily and Zachary. They spent time together in silence, learning to exist in each other's presence without the need for constant words. The bond between them grew stronger each day, yet Emily couldn't shake the uncertainty that lingered in the back of her mind. She still couldn't fully believe that she, of all people, could be the one to heal the cold, distant Alpha King. But each time she looked into his eyes, she felt something stir in her chest, a warmth that she had never known. It wasn't just the heat of attraction. It was something deeper, something that connected them in ways she couldn't explain. Zachary, for his part, was not without his own doubts. He had spent so long burying his emotions, hiding his vulnerabilities behind the mask of a king. But with Emily, he felt the walls inside him slowly crumbling, piece by piece. She was the key to his heart, the one who could thaw the ice that had surrounded it for so long. But still, the weight of his responsibilities, the weight of his title, pressed down on him. He was the Alpha King. He couldn't afford to show weakness, not even to her. The moment they were alone one evening, Emily felt a strange unease settle in her chest. Zachary had been quieter than usual, his gaze distant, as though he were lost in thought. She watched him from across the room, noticing how his posture seemed more rigid than normal, how his hands clenched at his sides, as if holding on to something just out of reach. Zachary, she called softly, walking over to him. He didn't respond right away. It wasn't like him to ignore her. Her heart ached at the sight of him, standing there like a stone statue, so close yet so far away. Zachary, what's wrong? Her voice broke the silence, but he still didn't answer. Instead, he finally turned to face her, his expression conflicted. I can't do this, he said, his voice low, filled with an emotion Emily couldn't place. Do what? She asked, her chest tightening at his words. Be with you, he admitted, his voice rough. I'm the Alpha King. I have responsibilities, duties that come before everything else. I can't afford to let anyone close. Not even you. His words hit her like a physical blow. Emily took a step back, her mind racing. She had never expected him to say something like that. Not after everything they had shared. But you told me. She started, her voice trembling. I know what I told you. He interrupted, his tone harder now. But that was before I realized just how much I had to lose. I've lived my life for my pack, for my people. I can't risk it all for something that— He stopped himself, his gaze flickering away from hers. Something that what? Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Something that could break me, Zachary finished quietly. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Emily could feel the sting of his words, the hurt of knowing that the connection they had wasn't enough to make him change his mind. She had always known that being with him wouldn't be easy, but this was different. This was the reality of being with someone so powerful, so burdened by his title. He was a king, and she was just an Omega. What chance did they really have? But then, something shifted inside Emily. She had spent so long believing she wasn't enough, believing she didn't deserve love or happiness. But Zachary was wrong. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when she had come this far. Zachary, she said, her voice steady now. You are more than just the Alpha King. And she stepped closer to him, her eyes meeting his with a fire he hadn't seen before. I am not just an Omega. I am not weak, and I am not someone who will let you push me away. Zachary looked at her, his eyes wide in surprise. For the first time, he saw something in her that he hadn't seen before, a strength, a determination that matched his own. And in that moment, something inside him snapped. The walls he had built around his heart shattered. Emily, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't want to hurt you. I've spent so many years hiding from everything that could make me feel, and now I don't know how to handle this. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. You don't have to handle it alone, she whispered. We're in this together. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your own. Zachary stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe in something beyond duty, beyond the throne. Together, he repeated, his voice a little softer now. Emily smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. She wasn't just a rejected Omega anymore. She was his mate. And together, they would face whatever the future held. The days that followed were filled with a quiet understanding between Emily and Zachary. The bond between them had deepened, and while their connection was still new, it felt like it had always been meant to be. They spent their days in each other's company, learning the depths of their feelings, their unspoken promises to each other hanging in the air. Despite the growing closeness, there were still moments when Emily could see the weight of Zachary's title pressing down on him. He carried the burdens of the kingdom, the responsibilities of a king that came with expectations, pressures, and sacrifices. But in those moments, when his eyes met hers, it was as though the world outside faded, and all that mattered was the quiet peace they shared. One evening, as they sat together by the crackling fire, Zachary turned to her, his expression thoughtful. I never thought I would find someone like you, he said, his voice steady but filled with something Emily had come to recognize, vulnerability. I spent my life pushing people away, building walls around myself to keep my heart safe. But you broke through every wall I built. Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. She had never felt more seen, more valued, than she did in this moment. I don't need you to be perfect, she replied softly. I just need you to be you. Zachary smiled, a genuine smile that made his eyes soften. I don't know what the future holds, he said quietly. But I know I want you by my side, Emily. I want to face whatever comes together. Her heart raced at his words. She had always believed that her life would be ordinary, that she would never be anyone's first choice, let alone the mate of an Alpha King. But here she was, standing beside him, her heart full of love for a man who had once been a stranger, but now meant everything to her. Whatever happens, she said, her voice firm with the certainty of her own feelings, we'll face it together. As the days passed, they grew even closer. Zachary began to let go of some of the emotional distance he had kept for so long. They shared moments of quiet laughter, soft conversations, and an unspoken trust that seemed to bind them more tightly than any words could. Emily, too, felt herself growing in ways she had never expected. She had always been the one who doubted herself, who thought of herself as nothing more than a broken omega, unworthy of love or attention. But with Zachary, she saw herself differently. She saw someone capable of strength, of love, of standing beside a man who had once seemed so unreachable. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, Zachary stopped and turned to face her, his hand reaching for hers. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice more serious than usual. "I don't want to keep anything from you. Not anymore." Emily looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" she asked softly. Zachary took a deep breath, his gaze intense. "I've been offered alliances, promises of power, marriage proposals from other packs. But none of that matters to me anymore. All I want is you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily felt her chest tighten, emotions swirling within her. "Zachary, you don't have to choose me over everything else. You have responsibilities. You are a king." Zachary shook his head, his expression softening. "I've realized that no amount of power or wealth will make me happy. What I want is you, Emily. You're my mate, and that's all that matters to me." Tears welled in her eyes at his words, the depth of his love and devotion overwhelming her. She had always feared that she wasn't enough, that she couldn't be the one to heal his broken heart. But in this moment, she realized that they were two halves of the same whole, connected by something stronger than fate, love. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "I want you too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want us to be together, no matter what the future holds." Zachary leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Then we will be," he promised. "Together, forever." The weight of his words settled around them like a blanket, and for the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe in the future they would build. Together, they could face anything. The kingdom, the world, and even their own doubts. They had each other, and that was all they needed. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Emily felt her connection to Zachary grow stronger. They had become inseparable, sharing both quiet moments and conversations filled with dreams of the future. Yet, despite the peace they had found in each other, there was still the looming reality of Zachary's responsibilities as Alpha King. He carried the weight of the kingdom, a burden that neither of them could ignore. As the nights grew colder and the moon rose higher in the sky, Emily often found herself watching him from across the room, her heart heavy with the knowledge that he would have to return to the throne, to the duties that had kept him distant for so long. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Zachary broke the silence that had fallen between them. "Emily," he began, his voice low and serious. She turned to him, her heart skipping a beat at the way he said her name, like it was a promise. "There's something we need to discuss. Something I've been putting off." Emily's brow furrowed in concern. She had never seen him so somber. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zachary looked at her, his eyes filled with both determination and regret. "I can't hide from this anymore. The kingdom needs me, and I need to take my place as the leader. But that doesn't mean I want to leave you behind." Emily's heart sank, and she instinctively reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "I know your duty is important," she said softly. "But I also know that you don't have to do it alone. We're a team now. I'm not going anywhere." Zachary's gaze softened, and he squeezed her hand in return. "I don't want to leave you," he admitted, his voice full of emotion. "But there are things I must do, decisions I must make, and I can't do it with you by my side in the way I wish. Not yet." The pain in his eyes was undeniable, and Emily could feel the weight of his words settle heavily in her chest. She knew that being with him wasn't just about love. It was about navigating a world that would never allow them to simply be. The complexities of his position as Alpha King made everything harder, but she understood. "What are you asking of me?" she whispered, her heart torn. "I need you to understand," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I need you to trust that this isn't goodbye. This is just a pause. I will always come back to you." Emily took a deep breath, her emotions swirling within her. She knew that his words were true. The Alpha King couldn't step away from his duties forever, no matter how much he wished to be with her. But she also knew that their love was strong enough to withstand the distance, the time apart. I trust you, Zachary, she said softly, the sincerity in her voice clear. I'll wait for you. I'll always wait for you. Zachary's face softened, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace, his lips brushing her forehead in a tender kiss. You are my heart, Emily, he murmured, and that will never change. No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, you are my home. In that moment, Emily felt a surge of emotion, a deep sense of peace settling in her chest. She had always feared being alone, being abandoned. But now, with Zachary's words echoing in her heart, she knew she would never be alone again. As long as they had each other, they could face anything. And so, with the weight of the world pressing down on them, they faced their uncertain future together, knowing that no matter the distance, their hearts would always be one. Zachary stood as the leader of his people, and Emily stood by him, ready to support him in every way she could. And while the path ahead was still unclear, one thing was certain: they were in this together. As the days passed, the distance between Emily and Zachary seemed to grow, but it wasn't the kind of distance that came from a lack of affection or love. It was the kind that came from duty, from the heavy responsibilities that weighed on Zachary's shoulders. Emily had never seen him like this before, always distant, always focused on the greater good of the kingdom. She understood it, and yet, it didn't make it any easier. Zachary's duties as Alpha King took him further away, to meetings, to councils, to people who depended on him. But every time he returned to her, it was as though nothing had changed. She would find him at her side, as if no time had passed, as if nothing in the world mattered except for the two of them. One evening, as Emily prepared a simple dinner in the kitchen, she felt his presence before she even heard his footsteps. The air around her shifted, charged with the same energy that always seemed to surround him. She turned to find Zachary standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You're here, she said softly, a gentle smile on her lips. I wasn't expecting you tonight. Zachary stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm sorry I've been so distant, he said, his voice filled with quiet regret. I know you've been patient, but I can't help the responsibilities I have. I've been needed everywhere, but here. Emily set the spoon down and walked over to him, taking his hands in hers. I understand, she said, her voice steady. You have your kingdom to run, your people to care for. I know it's not easy, but I miss you. His eyes softened at her words, and he pulled her close, enveloping her in the warmth of his embrace. I miss you too, he whispered into her hair. More than I can say, but I promise, Emily, when this is all over, I will make it right. We will have our time, just the two of us. She held on to him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. It was strange how much she had come to rely on him, how much she had come to depend on the love he had shown her. In a world that had once seemed so vast and lonely, Zachary had become her anchor. I believe you, she murmured, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. I'm here for you, Zachary. Whatever you need, whatever happens, I'll be by your side. He smiled, his eyes reflecting a tenderness that Emily had come to cherish. Thank you, he said quietly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. I don't deserve you, but I'm grateful you're here. Emily's heart fluttered at his words, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe that no matter the challenges ahead, no matter the time they had to spend apart, they were stronger together. You don't have to deserve me, she said softly. I choose you. Now, always, and forever. Zachary's smile deepened, and he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. You're my world, Emily, and I'll make sure you know it every day. As the evening wore on, Emily and Zachary shared a quiet dinner, the weight of the world momentarily forgotten as they laughed and talked about nothing in particular. In those moments, everything seemed perfect, but the reality of their world was never far away, and as the night came to a close, Zachary stood to leave. I have to go back, he said, his voice heavy with the knowledge of what awaited him outside their sanctuary. Emily nodded, her heart sinking at the thought of him leaving again. I know, she whispered, but we'll be okay. Zachary gave her one last lingering look, his eyes filled with love and determination. I'll return as soon as I can, he promised, before stepping out into the night. Emily watched him go, her heart aching with the familiar feeling of longing. She knew their path wouldn't be easy. She knew there would be obstacles, hardships, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that they had something stronger than all of that. They had each other. And no matter how far apart they were, no matter how many responsibilities weighed on him, she would always be there, waiting for him to come back to her. She closed the door behind her, her heart full of love and hope for the future, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could face anything that came their way. The weeks passed in a blur of moments, both sweet and painful. Emily and Zachary's bond had only deepened, but the distance between them remained, not by choice, but by circumstance. Zachary had to fulfill his responsibilities as Alpha King, and though Emily understood this, the ache in her chest never quite went away. Each time they parted, it felt as though a piece of her went with him. Still, every reunion was like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that no matter how far apart they were, they belonged together. One evening, after several days of absence, Zachary returned, looking more weary than usual. His eyes, though tired, softened when he saw her, and for a moment, it was as though the world outside didn't matter. "You're back," Emily said, her voice light despite the heavy emotions she carried. She walked over to him, her heart racing as she took in his worn expression. He had been working non-stop, managing the kingdom, handling the politics that weighed on his shoulders like a storm cloud. "I'm sorry," Zachary said, his voice hushed with exhaustion. "I didn't mean to worry you." Emily shook her head, a soft smile crossing her lips. "You don't have to apologize for doing what you must," she replied, brushing a hand across his cheek. "But you look tired. You need to rest." Zachary chuckled softly, though it lacked its usual warmth. "Rest seems like a luxury I can't afford." Emily's expression softened as she took his hand and led him to the small sitting area by the fire. "You deserve a little peace, Zachary," she said gently, sitting beside him and pulling him into a comfortable embrace. "And you deserve to feel like you can be yourself, not just the king." Zachary let out a long breath, the tension slowly beginning to leave his body as he relaxed into her warmth. "I don't know how to balance it all," he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "There are moments when I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. The kingdom needs me, but I also need you. And I don't know how to reconcile the two." Emily's heart ached at his words. She knew the weight of the crown was heavy, that Zachary felt torn between his duty and his desire to be with her. "You don't have to choose," she said softly, her hands gently stroking his back. "I'm not asking you to give up being the Alpha King. I'm asking you to let me be here for you, to help you carry the burden." Zachary raised his head, looking at her with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You make it sound so simple," he said, his voice filled with awe. "But I don't want to drag you into my world of duty and politics. You deserve more than that." Emily met his gaze, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. "What I deserve is to be with you. And if that means sharing your world, then I'll do it. We'll do it together." Zachary's chest tightened at her words. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of his crown lighten. Maybe he hadn't been as alone in all of this as he had thought. Maybe he didn't have to carry the world on his shoulders by himself. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "For seeing me. For accepting me, despite everything." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with love for the man who had once seemed so untouchable. "There's nothing to thank me for," she said softly. "I've always seen you, Zachary. And I always will." They sat there in the warmth of the fire, a quiet peace settling between them. Outside, the world continued, with its challenges and its trials. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough. As the night stretched on, Zachary held Emily close, the weight of his duties momentarily forgotten, replaced by the love and comfort they shared. No matter what came next, no matter how difficult the future would be, they would face it together, side by side, as equals. And for the first time in a long time, Zachary allowed himself to believe in a future that was more than just a crown and a kingdom. It was a future with Emily, his mate, the one who had awakened his heart and reminded him of what truly mattered. The days that followed were filled with a sense of peace and anticipation. Emily and Zachary had settled into a rhythm, learning to balance their love for one another with the weight of his duties as Alpha King. But as much as they tried to live in the moment, the reality of his position would never fully let go. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Zachary stood by the large windows of the palace, looking out at the distant mountains. Emily entered the room quietly, her heart beating a little faster at the sight of him. "Zachary," she said softly, her voice breaking the stillness. He turned toward her, his eyes filled with an unreadable emotion. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone serious, "about the future. About everything we've talked about." Emily walked over to him, placing her hand gently on his arm. "What about it?" she asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension in the air. "I can't keep doing this forever," he said, his gaze distant, almost as though he were speaking to himself. "The kingdom is in turmoil. There are factions that need my attention, and the weight of leadership feels heavier every day. But I can't ignore the pull I feel to you. To us." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She knew he was struggling, torn between his responsibilities as a ruler and his love for her. "Zachary," she whispered, looking up at him, "I understand. But you don't have to carry the burden alone." He shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. "I do," he said quietly. "As much as I want to believe that I don't, I do. The people depend on me, and there's still so much I need to do to secure their future." Emily took a step closer, placing her other hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "You don't have to be everything for everyone," she said softly. "And you don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you. Always." Zachary looked at her, his expression softening. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't know how to make it all work," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to try with you." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his presence, the depth of his love. "Then let's try," she said simply. Together. The air between them seemed to shift, the tension easing as they stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace. There was no perfect solution, no simple answer to the challenges they faced. But in that moment, Emily realized that it didn't matter. As long as they were together, they could face whatever came their way. "You're not alone, Zachary," she whispered, her voice full of certainty. "Not now, not ever." He kissed her forehead gently, a soft promise in the gesture. "And I won't ever let you feel alone, Emily. You are my strength, my heart. And together, we will build a future, no matter the challenges ahead." The weight of the world still loomed over them, but it no longer felt as insurmountable. They were a team, united not just by love, but by the understanding that together, they could face anything. In that quiet moment, with the sun setting outside and the world pressing in on them, they knew that no matter what happened, they had each other. And that was all they needed. As Zachary held Emily close, the kingdom, the duties, and the future seemed a little less daunting. They had found something far more powerful than the crown, each other. And with that, they were ready to face whatever the future held, side by side.